Well, kids, it's that time again. Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. We've been trying to get this one set up for a while. We've got Adam. We've got JV. I get that right?
You got it,
man. The fellas from Shadow of Everest who saw you guys at Riverfest was absolutely blown away by the band. Thank you for doing this, fellas.
Thanks for having us, man.
So I'll start with you, Adam. So I saw you in Shadows, and here was my introduction. So I had played on the Friday night, and I decided I was going to stay down there. And a friend of mine, Cheryl Arnold, I was up at her site, and she says, "My boys are going on in a couple of minutes. You got to go down and see them." So I'm like, okay, she was up kind of at the top. I had a few beer into me, and I'm like, okay, no problem. And I went down, and I told you guys after the show, I was blown away by what I saw. Just for somebody that's never seen this band before, Adam, just describe what it is you guys do.
Well, I mean, we spend a considerable amount of time focused on the energy of our live performance. And I mean, Sean, you had nothing but great, kind words for us after that show. And I remember that show. That was a really great show. And, that's really something that we try to bring to the table, is just perfect and hone in on our live experience. Because, I mean, we really value people and their energy at our shows. So we want to give that back because we get a lot from it, especially when people are really vibing with us on stage. So, I mean, we're always trying to up our game, and we're our own worst enemy too, and jam sometimes. So we're really hard on ourselves, and I mean, it shows live, because afterward we don't spend a lot of time saying, "Oh, this went well and that went well." We're like, "I heard you fuck that up, and I heard you mess that up, and I heard you drop a stick," and I think that makes us better, right? We push each other in the best kind of ways, and I think it shows in our live show. So,
well, and I mean, you're one of those guys that everybody loves, right? Like, it took me I don't know, years to perfect my instrument, and I see you the next night playing guitar and singing. It's kind of like, yeah, good for you, Adam. We love that. And I will say, before I go to JV, I mean, you were I made the comment, like, what you were drumming was, I mean, it was fairly technical, but a lot of people don't realize it's actually harder to play slow sometimes than it is fast, but you're doing stuff at multiple tempos, and we're going to geek out here for a second. What impressed me was how well you guys transitioned, because I know people who have done that style of music, that the drummer plays slow. He can't play slow. It's all wobbly. It's all weird. So, I was just very impressed with that and how tight you guys were.
Thanks, man. Yeah, like I actually love that you mentioned that, because there's a few moments in a lot of different songs that we tweak them when we play them live. Like, we have this one song, Swamp Ape, on our new record, and we get to this little bridgey part in between verses that leads in between the chorus and the verse. And when we hit that part live, we slow it down. JV, it must be at least 20 BPM, 30 BPM.
Easily.
Slower than the album, easy. Like, we drop it right down to this sludge and then pick it right back up in the verse. And anyway, we've honed it in, and it makes everything better. And I've loved watching people when we hit it. And our last show at Gus's, I actually watched this couple on the left of me. And every time we got into that part, the girl was standing in front of her husband. And every time we hit it, she kept going.
Yeah.
Sludge, right? And those change in tempos, I find, really captivate people, and they grab you, even if you're just talking, having a beer or something. You're like, what was that? Like, I love it.
They're important for your style of music. And so I'll ask you, JV. So obviously, and Adam, you guys all write. What's your process in terms of how you craft your songs when you start doing them?
That's just it. We all write. So Sean, our bassist, or myself will come to the table with a riff and say, "Hey guys, I have this. What do you think?" And if it sounds good, if everybody says, "Yeah, I like that," then we keep banging on it, And for the most part, Adam's really quick to start just experimenting right off the cuff. Like, we spend a lot of time going over and then revamping and deconstructing and reconstructing every aspect of these songs, because, like you said, there's a lot of changes, and those changes exist because they're calculated. We want our music to be exciting from top to bottom. We don't want to have any filler.
Well, that's fair. And I mean, there was days where, somebody I read a while ago, they said, streaming exists now because bands basically put out albums that had 3 good songs and the rest was crap. I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but I do know that I've bought albums in the past where it's like, oh man, like the first side might have had a hit, the rest of it was just terrible, like unlistenable sometimes, right? So To your point, I guess, Adam. Again, somebody doesn't hear you guys. What's the comparison? I know what I thought when I heard, but what's the comparison in terms of band that you guys would, be like?
I mean, I would love to consider ourselves a mix of Tool, Mastodon, Black Sabbath, and Rush in a blender. Like, wow. Just a little bit of the lighter side, a little bit of the more traditional heavy metal side, and then a lot of the prog time transitions, time signature transitions, tempo transitions, all those things, and the uniqueness of prog metal that I think we all in this band just absolutely adore. But I would say all of that mixed together, all jumble around, and a little sprinkle of classic rock, a little sprinkle of this and that. But that would be my ideal. If I could describe how we sound to me, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly where I feel influenced. Let's say that.
I'd agree with that. And JV, everybody's a product of their influences, and people say that, it's rare that, you grow up listening to country and you spend your whole entire life listening to the country, and then you get into a band and you're suddenly, Rush. It typically you're a product of your influences. So who would some of your influences have been, and what are some of your influences? Is there anything else besides what Adam had mentioned?
Well, I mean, there's some more of the classic rock giants, like big fan of Led Zeppelin. Yes. Rush. Pink Floyd, but bands like that those are the bands that I grew up with, and the bands that my father fed me when we were younger. But I like to describe us as that classic rock inspired with the modern flourish of progressive rock, progressive metal. One actually really, really nice thing as we've been cultivating ourselves as a band is I've found lately that somebody will approach me after a show and they'll say, "Man, you kind of sound like Mastodon in this section," or "There's another song you've got, you kind of sound a little bit more like Black Sabbath," and they can't quite put their finger on it. And they say 6 or 7 different bands you kind of sound like, and it's frankly it's because we sound like ourselves now, right? We kind of carved out. We sound like Shadow of Everest, and that's really cool.
So, I mean, back to influence again. I'm just quick. I mean, I've played shows where somebody will come up to me and say, "Man, that was a wicked fill," and I'll go, "This album, second song, third side," and it's like there's been so many great licks written. It's kind of like, why do I have to I'm just going to be lazy and steal something, maybe make it a little bit different. But, do you ever get anybody coming up? Because when I remember very clearly when I saw you play. Again, what I was impressed was a lot of people fumble through that style of music as drummers, right? It's like you got to have a tightness, and you had a tightness, but a lot of people don't. They're very sloppy.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from a drummer's perspective, one of the things I valued at a very early age, I started drumming in grade 7, and I mean, I remember I had all my buddies, they wanted to start drumming, and one of the things I was really kind of captivated by was playing the same thing the next day. Writing my pieces as you would write on a guitar or write lyrics to a song. I got really obsessive with writing something and then going to bed, getting up the next day and seeing if I could play the exact same thing again, and actually just composing my parts rather than, just kind of feeling what was there. And I think our writing style, I mean, when I came into the band, I think JV was the first person to kind of call me out on that. And say, we jammed one day and then we went a week and then we came back and played the same song again. He said, "You're playing the same thing you played last week." And not that it was bad or horrible. It was just, I've written my parts, and that's what I've taken out of that is I try to write my music. And I think a lot of the greatest drummers that I consider my biggest influences, my biggest heroes, you're going up on stage every night. Neil Peart wasn't going up and playing Tom Sawyer and having all the fans in there doing the air drumming, playing the wrong notes and playing the wrong thing. He was playing, and he wrote his parts. Chris Adler is another huge influence of mine, ex-Lamb of God. He mastered writing. He was a perfectionist, in my opinion, and everyone's got their opinion on people, but as far as a musician goes, that man wrote his parts. I thought he was really good and really precise, and I try to bring that kind of energy to it, that precision, especially with prog metal.
Well, right. And I mean, I'll tell you a lesson that I learned at a very young age. I was playing a club, and we had a light man he's gone on to do great things. He's basically worked for Cirque du Soleil, and he's toured the world with guys. And at the time, he was here locally, and so we used to end a certain song at the end of a set the same way every time. And I don't know if there was girls in the audience or whatever. I decided I was going to mix it up. I feel pretty good about myself. And he comes in and he kicks the door and he says, I'll never forget it. People do not come to see you. They come to see the light show. And basically what he was saying was, we were the type of band that everything was the same way every night. You could have different vamps and all that stuff, but he basically said to me, you took the time to write what you're playing while you're frigging around with it. So I get what you guys are saying, because as you start to create that identity, and JV, chime in here, but you start to create that identity and people get used to their tunes, they want to hear everything like the record. They don't want to, hear what your jam skills are like.
To some degree, you're absolutely right. Nobody goes to see their favorite band and then see them, screw it up because they're experimenting in the moment. One thing that I've loved going to see bands, and Tool was a fantastic example of this. They'd start a song, it was Stinkfist. It starts with this kind of chimey, strange, odd bunch of sounds, and then the whole band kicks in. But then before the big solo breakdown section, when they played it live, they brought the intro back, and they bring the intro back and they double it for its, they make it twice as long and just kind of throw everybody a little sideways and say, well, I recognize the part. It doesn't really belong here though. And then the big breakdown happens and everybody goes wild. So we like to do that. Adam said earlier with Swamp Ape, in the bridge section, we slow it way down. And so the part is there and you expect the change, but there is an element that you have to be with us live to get that. That's an experience you won't get on the record, albeit it's well written on the record. It's well executed. I can listen to it 100 times and it's a great piece of music, but we want to give, like Adam said, that energy, our love for music and our love for the amount of time that we've put into building these little adventures and these little stories. We like to give that back to our audience in a special way. So the parts are there, and you can be guaranteed that we've got at least one in one set that is.
I would say we've never played a set where we haven't at least taken one song and said, you know what? A lot of it would be like transitions between songs. Cause when you're playing live, it's not like a record. The record plays start to finish, and we built our last record that way, JV. We built it exactly how it's a journey, right? From start to finish. But when you're playing live, a lot of times you want to kind of get a little fancy with how you're going to transition from song to song, whether you have to switch tunings or you can go right in, so we do a lot of things like that too. We'll take the ending of a song and, it'll be true to the album right till the very last 20 seconds. And then we tag something on to bridge it into another tune or something like that. So.
Well, and it's like we rehearsed this beforehand, because I want and this will be the last question for the segment before we go into segment 2. But I always found my first few times recording was very humbling, because you would work on something and then hear the playback and go like, oh my God, that never fit in there. And I thought it was so cool. With the tunes that you do you sometimes record them and go, this isn't working, and change them up? And does that happen with you guys in the studio, or are you pretty much what you rehearse is what gets down on tape?
Well, you know what? Like you said, the recording experience can be very humbling. And I think very early on, because of our kind of music, I know working with Sean anyway, we had some nightmare sessions for our first album. And it was just, oh my God, why? Why doesn't this fit? More recently, when we were doing Where Giants Die, that's just where we learned who didn't know a riff.
Yeah.
We'd be sitting there and 3 guys are watching the one guy record, and then we'd be finished the track and everyone says, hey man, I think you're playing a wrong note there. No, this is the way I've always played it. Well, then you've always played it wrong.
And it's funny you mention that, because it's like sometimes you're sitting there and you listen to yourself, and like I've got a lot of experience now recording. I do it on a regular basis, but I can remember early sessions, like I almost didn't get to record on an album because I couldn't play to a click track. And it was like, figure it out by tomorrow or you're done. And I never not play with a click track now, you know what I mean? And those are just little things that you learn along the way. Look, we're gonna stick a pin in this. We're gonna come back for segment 2. Shadow of Everest boys here. We're back after this.